In 1955, a 14-year-old boy from Chicago went to visit family in Mississippi for the summer. 3 days after he arrived, 2 white men showed up at his great-uncle's house in the middle of the night. They dragged the boy out of bed, threw him in the back of a pickup truck, and drove away. 3 days later, his body was pulled from the Tallahatchie River. He had been beaten so badly that his own mother could barely recognize him. One eye was gouged out, his skull was crushed, he'd been shot in the head, and a 75-pound cotton gin fan was tied around his neck with barbed wire to weigh his body down. What was his crime, you ask? He allegedly whistled at a white woman in a grocery store. His name was Emmett Till. What happened to him and what his mother did next would help spark the civil rights movement. But this story doesn't end in 1955, because decades later the woman who accused Emmett admitted something that changed everything. And even today, nearly 70 years later, people are still fighting for justice for Emmett Till. This is his story. Emmett Louis Till was born in Chicago on July 25, 1941. He grew up on the South Side, raised by his mother Mamie Till Mobley. His father had been killed during World War II. Mamie worked hard to give Emmett a good life, and by all accounts, he was a happy, energetic kid. His friends called him Bobo. Emmett was outgoing, funny, and liked to joke around. He had polio as a child, which left him with a slight stutter, but he didn't let it slow him down. He loved life. He was just a regular 14-year-old boy. In August 1955, Emmett's great-uncle, Moses Wright, invited him to come visit Mississippi for a few weeks. Moses lived in a tiny town called Money in the Mississippi Delta. He thought Emmett might enjoy spending time in the country, maybe helping out on the farm. Mamie was hesitant. She knew Mississippi was different from Chicago. Very different. Chicago in 1955 was segregated, but it wasn't the Jim Crow South. Black people in Chicago could vote, could go to any store, could sit anywhere on the bus. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't Mississippi. Mississippi in 1955 was one of the most dangerous places in America for black people. Lynchings were still happening. Black people who stepped out of line, who didn't show proper deference to white people, could be killed, and their killers would never be punished. Mamie knew this. She warned Emmett. She told him he had to be careful, he had to be respectful, he had to understand that things were different down south. Emmett said he understood. And on August 20th, 1955, he got on a train headed to Mississippi. He was excited. He was going to meet his cousins, see a different part of the country, and have an adventure. He had no idea he had less than a week to live. Emmett arrived in Money, Mississippi on August 21st. His great-uncle Moses picked him up and they drove to Moses's small house in the countryside. Emmett met his cousins and other relatives. They showed him around. He was having a good time. On August 24th, a Wednesday afternoon, Emmett and some of his cousins went into town. They stopped at Bryant's Grocery and Meat Market, a small store owned by a white couple, Roy and Carolyn Bryant. Roy wasn't there that day, but Carolyn was working behind the counter. What happened next has been debated for decades, but here's what we know for certain. Emmett went into the store, he bought some candy, and at some point during or after that transaction, Carolyn Bryant claimed that Emmett did something inappropriate. She said he grabbed her hand, made suggestive comments, and as he left the store, he whistled at her. Emmett's cousins who were with him said he didn't do any of that. Some said he might have whistled but not at her. He sometimes whistled to help with his stutter. Others said nothing inappropriate happened at all, but it didn't matter what actually happened because Carolyn Bryant told her husband Roy what she claimed Emmett had done, and Roy Bryant was furious. For 3 days nothing happened. Emmett and his cousins went about their business. Maybe they thought the incident had been forgotten. But Roy Bryant hadn't forgotten. He was planning something. In the early morning hours of August 28th, around 2:30 a.m., Moses Wright heard a knock at his door. 2 white men were standing outside, Roy Bryant and his half-brother J.W. Millam. They were armed. They demanded to see the boy from Chicago who had done the talking at the store. Moses tried to reason with them. He offered to pay them money. He told them Emmett was just a boy, that he was from up north and didn't know better. He begged them not to take him. They pushed past Moses into the house. They found Emmett in bed, still half asleep. They ordered him to get dressed. Emmett's aunt begged them to leave him alone. The other children in the house were terrified. Roy and J.W. dragged Emmett outside to their pickup truck. Carolyn Bryant was waiting in the truck. They threw Emmett in the back and drove away. Moses Wright stood in his doorway, helpless, watching them disappear into the darkness. He would never see Emmett alive again. What happened over the next several hours is based on confessions Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam gave later, after they were acquitted and couldn't be retried. They drove Emmett to a barn. They pistol whipped him. They beat him with their fists. They demanded he apologize for what he'd done to Carolyn. Some reports say they made him carry a 75-pound cotton gin fan, the heavy metal wheel used in cotton processing. Emmett, through his pain and terror, refused to beg. One of his cousins later said Emmett wasn't the type to back down. Even facing death, the 14-year-old boy from Chicago wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him broken. So they kept beating him. They gouged out one of his eyes. They crushed his skull. And then J.W. Millam shot him in the head with a .45 caliber pistol. They tied the cotton gin fan around his neck with barbed wire, drove to the Tallahatchie River, and threw his body in, hoping it would sink and never be found. But 3 days later, on August 31st, a local boy fishing in the river saw something. Emmett's body had surfaced. When Moses Wright was called to identify the body, he could barely recognize his nephew. Emmett had been beaten so badly that he was nearly unrecognizable. The sheriff wanted to bury him immediately, but Moses insisted on sending Emmett's body back to Chicago, back to his mother. When the casket arrived in Chicago, authorities told Mamie Till Mobley that she couldn't open it. The body was too badly decomposed, they said. It was too disturbing. But Mamie insisted she needed to see her son. She needed to know what they had done to him. When she opened that casket and saw what had been done to her 14-year-old boy, Mamie made a decision that would change history. Mamie Till Mobley decided that the world needed to see what had been done to Emmett. She insisted on an open casket funeral. She wanted everyone to see the brutalized body of her son. She wanted people to see what racism looked like, what hate looked like, what Mississippi had done to a child. On September 3, 1955, Emmett's funeral was held at Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ in Chicago. Thousands of people came. The line to view the casket stretched for blocks. Jet magazine, a popular black publication, published photos of Emmett in his casket. The images were horrifying, shocking, and they spread across the country. Black Americans who saw those photos were outraged. White Americans who saw them were forced to confront the reality of racial violence in the South. You couldn't look away. You couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. Mamie gave interviews. She spoke at churches and rallies. She told Emmett's story over and over. She refused to let people forget what had happened to her son. Meanwhile, in Mississippi, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam were arrested and charged with murder. The evidence against them was overwhelming. They had kidnapped Emmett. Multiple people had seen them. Moses Wright could identify them. But this was Mississippi in 1955, and the defendants were white men accused of killing a black boy. The trial began on September 19th, just 3 weeks after Emmett's body was found. The courtroom was segregated. Black spectators had to sit in a separate section. Black reporters were confined to a card table at the back of the room. The prosecution presented its case. Moses Wright took the stand and did something incredibly brave. When asked to identify the men who had taken Emmett, Moses stood up, pointed directly at Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam and said, "There he is," in a clear, steady voice. In the Jim Crow South, a black man publicly accusing white men of murder was dangerous, potentially deadly. Moses Wright knew he might be killed for testifying, but he did it anyway. Other witnesses testified, the evidence was presented, it seemed like an open and shut case. The defense argued that the body pulled from the river wasn't even Emmett Till. They claimed it was a conspiracy, that the NAACP had planted a body to make white Mississippians look bad. They said Roy and J.W. were innocent, upstanding citizens. The all-white, all-male jury deliberated for just 67 minutes. One juror later said it wouldn't have taken that long, except they stopped to drink soda pop. The verdict: not guilty. Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam walked out of that courtroom free men. They smirked, they shook hands with their lawyers, they went home to their families. And across America, people watched in horror as justice was denied. But the story doesn't end there. In January 1956, just a few months after their acquittal, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam gave an interview to Look magazine. They were paid $4,000 for the interview, about $45,000 in today's money. And in that interview, they confessed, they admitted everything. They described kidnapping Emmett, beating him, killing him, throwing his body in the river. They couldn't be retried because of double jeopardy. They had been acquitted, so they were legally protected from being charged again. They knew they could confess without consequences. They thought they had gotten away with murder, and legally they had, but history would remember them differently. Emmett Till's murder became a catalyst for the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks said that when she refused to give up her seat on that bus in Montgomery, Alabama, just 3 months after Emmett's murder, she was thinking about Emmett Till. Civil rights activists across the South pointed to Emmett's case as proof that the system was broken, that black people would never get justice under Jim Crow, that change had to come. Mamie Till Mobley spent the rest of her life telling Emmett's story. She became an educator and activist. She refused to let her son's death be meaningless. She turned her grief into purpose. Moses Wright, after testifying, had to flee Mississippi. He moved to Chicago because it wasn't safe for him to stay in the South after what he'd done in that courtroom. Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam lived the rest of their lives in Mississippi. Their businesses failed. People avoided them. They died in the 1990s, never having faced legal consequences for murdering a child. But in 2004, nearly 50 years after Emmett's death, something happened. The FBI reopened the case. Why? Because there were questions about Carolyn Bryant's testimony, questions about whether she had told the truth about what happened in that store. The investigation didn't lead to any new charges. Most of the people involved were dead, but it did lead to Carolyn Bryant finally telling the truth. In 2008, a historian named Timothy Tyson interviewed Carolyn Bryant. She was elderly by then, living in North Carolina, and during that interview, she admitted something stunning. She said that Emmett Till never grabbed her, never made suggestive comments, never did any of the things she claimed he did in 1955. She lied, and her lie got a 14-year-old boy tortured and murdered. When Tyson's book, The Blood of Emmett Till, was published in 2017, revealing Carolyn's confession, there was renewed outrage. Calls for Carolyn to be prosecuted for perjury. Demands for justice. In 2022, nearly 70 years after Emmett's murder, a grand jury in Mississippi declined to indict Carolyn Bryant Donham on charges of kidnapping and manslaughter. She was 88 years old by then. The reasoning: not enough evidence, the case was too old, witnesses were dead. Carolyn Bryant Donham died in 2023, having never faced legal consequences for her role in Emmett Till's murder. But Emmett Till is not forgotten. In 2022, President Biden signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act into law, making lynching a federal hate crime. It took until 2022, but Emmett's name is now attached to legislation that aims to prevent others from suffering his fate. The site where Emmett's body was found is now a memorial. There's a marker in Mississippi honoring him, though it's been vandalized multiple times by racists who still refuse to acknowledge what was done. Emmett Till is taught in schools, his story is told and retold, and the photos his mother insisted the world see, the images that shocked America in 1955, are still powerful today. Emmett Till would be 83 years old today if he had lived. He might have had children, grandchildren, a full life. Instead, he's forever 14, forever the boy in that casket, forever the symbol of what racism costs. Here's what we need to remember about Emmett Till: not that he was murdered, but that the system protected his murderers. That racism wasn't just about individual hatred. It was structural, institutional, built into the very fabric of society. And while laws have changed, while progress has been made, Emmett's story reminds us that the fight for justice is never truly over. What are your thoughts on what happened to Emmett? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that need to be told. See you in the next one.